Well, I started my day here today just after 7 a.m. Most days aren't quite that early, but we're back to working. City Council has started back to its regular schedule. We're doing that in part because we know the economy is reopening and we want to help that process by moving along planning applications, building applications, and our recovery plans themselves. But my number one concern really has been for the community. I have had two task forces that have been trying to help vulnerable residents in our community, and then the second one to help the business community. I can't say enough about the way this community has rallied around people who need help, whether it's online or donations to charities or the way those organizations have responded. Just about everybody who needs help has been getting it in one form or another. Where those gaps exist, we want to hear about it, and that's a lot of the work that we're doing, reaching out, whether it's to the shelter system or the food banks or even the building managers in apartment buildings to say, do you have residents that are struggling? I mean, that's the kind of work we do every day to try and help out our residents. Initially, of course, everything was shut down and closed for a period of time. Now, as the case numbers are getting a little better, we're starting to be able to reopen some services. And then more broadly, of course, in the economy, we are seeing more stores being able to reopen, certain types of businesses reopen. And it's the city's responsibility to enforce the emergency orders to make sure that that's being done safely. So our bylaw department has been very busy giving guidance to stores where it's possible and enforcing the rules, of course, where it's necessary. We've seen a lot of people wanting to use the waterfront despite the weather, and I think as the nice weather's starting to arrive, a lot more people are going to want to use the waterfront. So we are following the lead of many cities around the world and indeed in Canada and closing a small section of Lakeshore Drive to allow people to walk and bike and rollerblade while distancing. So this creates more public space for people to be able to safely get outside, because we want people to get outside. It's one of the things that's keeping us all sane during this pandemic. I'm not sure I've ever gone for as many walks as I have over the last 2 months. But we need to be able to have space to do that safely, and obviously traffic levels are much lower. One of the nice things about Lakeshore is we're able to close only half of the road, so it'll just be the northbound lanes from the Tiffin boat launch to Victoria that are closed. You'll still be able to go southbound. And then, of course, Bradford Street is right next door with 4 lanes. It's often not very busy at all, so there's a good alternative. We don't anticipate any traffic problems associated with this. So municipalities are under major cost constraints. So just for example, here at the City of Barrie, we've had 4 of our major areas of revenue go to zero or close to it. So transit fares, as you can imagine, transit ridership is down 80%. Our rec centers are closed, so none of those rec fees, camps, sports, rec programs. Those are many millions of dollars of lost revenue to the city, and as a consequence, we've had to do things like laying off staff, something I had hoped we would never ever have to do. So we've tried to reduce our costs, but the reality is the loss of revenue extends beyond that. We have people who can't pay their property taxes, and we have offered some deferrals, although those will ultimately have to be paid. So there's a cash crunch, and this cash crunch is severe in municipalities all across the country. So you've seen mayors and municipal councils across Canada asking for help from the provincial and federal government, and to be frank, we're going to need that. Like every other sector of the economy, we've been hard hit. We've seen relief come from the federal government for residents and businesses alike, and unfortunately, we're going to need that too. This situation is unlike any other. We've had recessions before, but this is different than a traditional recession. This is a shutdown due to a pandemic, and it's affecting different sectors of our economy differently than a traditional recession. Often when you hit hard times, you see manufacturing plants, scale back or close. You see construction projects stop and people are out of work in those sectors. There's been a bit of that, but not as much. The sectors hit hardest here: personal services, small business, food and accommodation, hotels and restaurants, and obviously retail that's had to close. So those sectors are going to need different kinds of help than the government's been able to offer previously. So we've really been trying to do a lot of talking with those sectors, with those operators and those associations that represent them, to say, what could we do this time to help? And the message we've received from so many is, I can hang on for a month or two. 3 or 4 months, that's a different story. So we're all so hopeful that the case numbers will drop enough that Ontario will be confident in reopening more of the economy. There's been some hopeful signs of that in the last few weeks. But a lot of that will depend on all of our efforts to stop the spread. We are getting through this. We've succeeded in stopping the spread largely, but if we don't finish that job, I'm concerned we may have to do this again, and a lot of businesses that might have survived the first time can't survive a second time. So I guess my broad message to everybody is you're helping businesses survive by stopping the spread, because there's no choice here between the economy and public health. If we don't stop the spread, the economy is going to suffer a much greater hit.